takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anita McCouet, and I'm the president of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Today, we're joined by the Honourable Jeff Yurek, Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, for a discussion about Ontario's response to COVID-19 in the context of protecting the environment, fighting climate change, and rebuilding the provincial economy. And if you weren't aware, next week is Waste Reduction Week. And we're going to touch on how his ministry works with all facets of the government and how they're planning for next week. Before we dive into today's topic, here's some information about how you can participate with us. The click here to switch stream button is helpful if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio should stay strong. Once you click on the questions tab, you can enter your questions and they will be sent directly to our moderator today. We are grateful for the support of two sponsors for today's event. Thank you to Bruce Power and Waste Connections of Canada for making today's event with Minister Yurek possible. This is a year unlike any other in our 124 years of operation. Our goal at the Canadian Club of Toronto continues to be upholding our mission of connecting Canadians to the programming that matters most. So we are proud to announce our 2020-2021 All Access Pass memberships, which will include free access to all of our programming. To learn more and to become a member, please visit us at canadianclub.org. Now to introduce today's speaker. The Honourable Jeff Yurek has served as the MPP for Elgin, Middlesex, London since 2011. Minister Yurek has served in various roles in government, including PC Health Critic, Minister of Natural Resources and Forestry, Minister of Transportation, and is currently the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Following his remarks, Minister Yurek will be joined in conversation with Vanmala Subramaniam, business reporter for The Logic. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is the toast we make to our country at the start of every event. We normally do this in person with the raising of a glass, so if you've got a glass of any liquid next to you, let's make a nod towards the screen and toast Canada. To Canada.
Canada.
Great. Minister Yurek, I'll turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Thank you very much, Anita, for that kind of introduction, and welcome everybody. I want to say that over a century, the Canadian Club of Toronto has been a forum to discuss the most important issues of the day. And nothing, I believe, is more important right now than meeting the unprecedented challenge of the global pandemic and moving forward with action to ensure long-term health and prosperity. I do want to thank Anita McCouet and Colleen Kennedy and everyone at the Canadian Club for the opportunity to have this discussion with you about environmental protection in the time of COVID-19 and, of course, rebuilding Ontario's economy. Our government first took office 2 years ago with a vision of an Ontario where strong environmental protection is balanced with strong economic growth. This balance is the guiding principle behind the Made in Ontario Environment Plan which was released almost 2 years ago as the blueprint for everything we do at the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to create a sustainable, prosperous Ontario. The Made in Ontario plan is a living document that enables us to modify our plans as new challenges arise and as new innovations and data emerge. COVID-19 has, of course, been an unprecedented challenge in our province, from the effect it's had on our public health and our healthcare system to the disruption of our economy. It's been especially hard for small businesses. It's changed the way we all do business, and it's no different at the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. Staff at my ministry have taken actions to help stop the spread of COVID-19, including the closing of the parks in early spring. Ontario Parks took careful reopening, enabling people to take part safely in a number of outdoor activities and enjoyed the benefits of nature, which right now is really, really important for our health and well-being. We also issued temporary emergency orders to ensure the province's drinking water and wastewater systems continue to operate and provide clean, safe drinking water to the public. Against the backdrop of the pandemic, we've continued to deliver our mandated services, although we've had to make some adjustments in recognition of the time-sensitive needs of businesses in our regulated communities. To this end, we provided temporary relief of certain administrative requirements, like extending deadlines for the 2019 greenhouse gas emissions reporting and verification. At the same time, our government responding to the new normal, we formed the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee to explore ways to stimulate economic growth and create jobs. We engaged in key sectors, including waste, clean tech, and parks and recreation, to find out how they have been affected by COVID-19 outbreak and how we can support them in the coming months. I've been really encouraged to see everyone is making health and safety a priority, and they recognize that collaboration and getting everybody involved in the recovery process is critical. For the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, COVID-19 has added another dimension to our work. It's a lens through which we look at everything we do today. A good example is the Bill 197, the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act. This bill included amendments to the Environmental Assessment Act to get infrastructure projects moving quickly. This will help us ensure the important infrastructure like roads, highways, and bridges can be planned in ways that are efficient while protecting the environment. The amendments to the Act, along with the updated regulations and guidance, will allow us to focus our efforts on those projects with higher potential to impact the environment. Last month, we posted our proposed project list for those significant projects that should be subject to comprehensive environmental assessments. We recently consulted on proposed amendments to our streamlined environmental assessment processes and are currently reviewing the input we have received. And our government will continue with the pressure on the federal government to defer to Ontario's process for projects that trigger both federal and provincial environmental assessment requirements. We are also continuing our work towards a modern regulatory assessment framework that is streamlined with consistent and standardized processes to replace class environmental assessments, and we will be consulting on the streamlined environmental regulations in the near future. These changes will help communities bounce back from the COVID-19 outbreak by giving municipalities and businesses the certainty they need to get key infrastructure projects built faster without sacrificing strong environmental protections. Our work to modernize environmental assessment complements our Open for Business initiative, which is making Ontario more competitive. By eliminating unnecessary red tape and improving our regulatory and legislative requirements to grow jobs and investment in the province, as well as support economic recovery. This work includes streamlining water power approvals, modernizing our waste information services, and amending the excess soil regulation and other regulations, so that projects delayed by COVID-19 can proceed and soil can be managed more flexibly while protecting human health and the environment. We've been listening closely to what the people of Ontario and the business communities here have to say in order to make things better for them. While our priority continues to be maintaining Ontario's high standards to keep people safe and healthy and protect the environment, our efforts to reduce red tape has resulted in significant savings for businesses. We're now building on this work with the Better for People, Smarter for Business Act, introduced last week by my colleague Prabhi Sukaria, the Associate Minister of Small Business and Red Tape Reduction. The proposed changes of the Act include supporting renewable and alternative fuels and emission reduction technology, improving hazardous waste tracking, making it easier for property developers to get environmental information they need by moving from paper-based processes to a digital delivery platform, and requiring water bottling companies to receive support from host municipalities before applying for a new or increased permit to take groundwater. Another way we're working to foster long-term economic growth is by working towards a circular economy that closes the loop by diverting waste materials from landfills and keeps the productive cycle to spur further economic activity. Right now, Ontarians generate nearly a ton of waste per person every year. Households are doing their part, and almost half of our residents' waste is diverted through the blue box, green bins, and backyard composts. Unfortunately, when you factor in waste from all other sources, residential, commercial, industrial, more than 70% of the total waste generated in our province is heading to our landfills. In addition to the environmental problems associated with landfills, they represent lost economic opportunities that materials could be used to make new products, and they're wasted. We made a commitment in our Made in Ontario Environment Plan to transition our diversion programs to a producer responsibility framework. This means producers will be responsible for finding new and innovative ways to manage their products and packaging more efficiently. These solutions could include the waste management sector working with producers to design products and packaging that are easier to recycle, and providing new solutions for recycling materials at end of life. An important advantage of producer responsibility is, in fact, excuse me here. When my speech just died on me here. Apologize for this. Well, the big important part of producer responsibility is, in fact, the fact that you can create a whole new economy at the same time while creating jobs and keeping it close in the Ontario province. Next week is Waste Reduction Week in Canada. I'm going to be making some announcements regarding next steps in our transition to producer responsibility programs. Most notably, I'll be releasing a series of proposals to improve blue box recycling in Ontario by encouraging packaging of products to be made more recyclable, especially plastics, increasing the list of materials that will be accepted in the blue box, and expanding consistent services to more communities. I'll also be sharing an update on our electrical and electronic equipment waste program, as well as a new pilot project for capturing plastics in our Great Lakes. I'm pretty excited about our new investments we'll be making to address the excess of food created by restrictions placed on restaurants and catering businesses during COVID-19 that have been compounded by the scaling back or cancellation of fundraisers and food drives over the past several months. This announcement will include measures to help get these excess food to Indigenous communities and others in need across the province. I'd also like to take a second just to comment on greenhouse gas emissions that are driving climate change. One key piece of our approach to battling climate change is the Emissions Performance Standards program, which holds large emitters accountable to the greenhouse gases. I'm happy to report that after over a year of discussion, the federal government recently informed us they have accepted our program as an alternative to the federal output-based pricing system. The program takes into account the unique circumstances of our economy and manufacturing sector. Importantly, these standards will be phased in over time to give industries enough time to meet their obligations, rather than hitting them right off the bat with targets they'd be hard-pressed to meet. Compliance with this program will help drive capital investments in innovative, low-carbon solutions at the sector and facility level. We are working with the federal government to ensure a smooth transition for industry and to ensure there is clear understanding around compliance requirements. Another aspect of our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is ensuring Ontarians have greater access to clean and affordable low-carbon energy. And that's a very important commitment in our Made in Ontario plan. We recognize that the private sector has the capital and capability and know-how to transform clean technology markets and transition Ontario and Canada to a low-carbon economy. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending the groundbreaking event for the Niagara Renewable Natural Gas Facility Partnership. The project, a partnership between Enbridge, Walker Industries, and Comcor Environmental, will provide renewable natural gas that is a Made in Ontario clean carbon neutral energy source. The project will help to build expertise in the green energy field and more green jobs in Ontario. We are also consulting with the clean technology and hydrogen sectors as part of our work through the Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee. We are looking at ways we can support clean technology sector, and we're working on an Ontario hydrogen strategy that increases and decarbonizes the production of hydrogen. It'll build distribution infrastructure and create more opportunities for end users across the economy. Our government is committing to unlocking innovation and entrepreneurship across the economy to build and create and stimulate jobs. This in turn will save money and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We need increased uptake of existing clean technologies, and we need new made in Ontario solutions. This will not only help Ontario, but also respond to growing global demand for clean technologies. Our government is focused on smart regulatory and policy approaches to facilitate and enable innovation. When it comes to fighting climate change specifically, we want to use government funds strategically to help facilitate the private sector's best projects and ideas to drive reductions. To do that, we're proposing an emission reduction fund to support and encourage investments across the province for initiatives that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The fund would leverage a limited initial investment from the government to attract funds from the private sector to drive investment in clean technologies. Work on this fund is ongoing, and we will need to reflect on the government's efforts to address COVID-19 and the federal government's economic recovery plans. Just in conclusion, the last 6 months have been a really challenging time for everyone. And Ontario is incredibly fortunate. We have a strong economy built on sturdy foundations we put in place over the last 2 years, including a well-protected environment. And we have a competitive and innovative private sector that is finding solutions to meet the challenges of COVID-19 and keep Ontario moving in the right direction. Change is not going to be easy, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I'm confident Ontario will emerge from the pandemic stronger than ever. And I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. I apologize that my speech somehow disappeared from my screen halfway through, but I think we made it through. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Minister. You recovered from the speech thing very well. I think I want to. There's a lot of ground that you covered in the speech, and you know But I want to start by touching on jobs. I think because that's top of mind for everyone. So you're on the Ontario COVID Jobs and Recovery Committee. Can you let's just talk about what are some of the discussions taking place in the committee when it comes to creating jobs in those specific kind of green sectors that you mentioned? So clean tech, hydrogen, what's the potential there in this province that maybe we hadn't really explored until we were forced to in this pandemic?
Right. No, that's a very good question. Thanks very much. It's been quite an interesting experience working on this committee, hearing the other ministers around the table talk about what's happening in their sectors, and each one have reached out. But I've been really interested the discussions that we've had in the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the discussions around the potential for the clean tech industry to really take off in this province. I know Ontario is a leader in water clean tech, but there's such an opportunity to with the government removing the barriers. And that's what we tried to listen to, is what barriers are in place that government can help alleviate in order to open up those tech sectors. So there's lots of ideas coming forward. And what I do like about the clean tech industry is it can happen anywhere in the province. It doesn't necessarily have to be in one specific region. So it really opens up opportunity for all Ontarians. What really came from that conversation that I was really happy about, that really kickstarted things, is our discussion on hydrogen. And the fact that Ontario needs a hydrogen strategy, so it gives some opportunity, some hope, and some consistency for the hydrogen sector to know that there's going to be a place for them in Ontario. And I have spoken to the Premier. He's pretty excited about hydrogen. So I hopefully in the next coming weeks we'll have a good announcement for the province of Ontario with regards to the hydrogen sector.
So there's definitely support from the government overall in terms of incentivizing the creation of these kinds of jobs. And would you say that this thinking around new sectors was kind of turbocharged because of COVID? And what was the correlation there? Yeah,
when pre-COVID-19, I mean, there was a push to always to try to expand what's available with regards to green jobs, with as I mentioned, clean tech or new innovative ways of dealing with our waste, moving towards a circular economy. But once we hit COVID-19 and we saw the economy shut down, it really generated an opportunity that we'd be kind of starting from scratch in certain areas to get the economy up and running. And that was our opportunity. And many businesses and stakeholders came forward saying, let's try to figure out how we can kickstart this new extra addition to our economy going forward. This is our opportunity. And under the leadership of Premier Ford and the Jobs and Recovery Committee under the chairmanship of Finance Minister Rod Phillips, that's opening up this opportunity to have these discussions and bring these proposals forward to the government.
You mentioned, I want to move on a little bit to the Environmental Assessment Act. I think that there's actually been a lot of discussion in media outlets and just generally amongst industry players about the changes in the EAA. So maybe we'll just start there. What was the reason why changes to the Environmental Assessment Act were made under the COVID-19 Recovery Act? Why was it done then?
Well, when we've been working on the environmental assessment changes for over a year with consultation, my parliamentary assistant Andrea Kanjan had done numerous roundtables. So it was in the works, and with the fact that COVID-19 had caused such economic hardship to the province, we felt it was part of the recovery process is to make the changes to the assessment program, which is going to free up the time frame it takes to get these projects off the ground. Right now, to do the work plan for environmental assessment can take up to 6 years before we even start the assessment. So with our changes going forward, we have a consistent, standardized process, which should save at least 3 years on the work to get the project up and running. And we feel part of the economic recovery is going to be the infrastructure that's going to be needed to be built throughout the province, particularly in municipalities. And by making these changes, we're ensuring that we have strong environmental protections after these changes are done. But what we're going to do is make the process a lot quicker and more effective, and where they can actually focus in on what is going to be actually happening to the environment, as opposed to doing all the preparatory work to even begin the study. So I think with the changes we made this past summer, Ontario is ready to roll once we start emerging from the pandemic.
Do you maybe have some examples, or could you elaborate a little bit more about what you were seeing when you took on this portfolio about the inefficiencies? So, I know different projects are different when it comes to assessing the environmental impact of them, but why was it, say, a 6-year time period in some cases, and how do you just so quickly bring it down to, say, 3 years?
Certainly, it's called standardizing the process. Basically, right now, the previous process was with every project that came online, they would have to do a work to create this work plan to decide how they're going to deliver the environmental assessment. And it was new every time, no matter if it was the same project at another part of the province. They had to start from scratch. And some of the far-reaching projects to do an infrastructure project, it was 6 years, and I'm trying to think of the region it was in, but it took 6 years just to do the work plan before the environmental study even began. You just think of the lost opportunity in jobs, the lost opportunity from the economic benefits of that infrastructure was the cost of the project going up in due to the fact of the time period. The other one we noticed as well is the government didn't focus in on one particular type of projects that really affected the environment. They treated, whether it was shoveling snow from your snow plows to building a massive dam structure, there was the same focus on the environmental protections. They use the same resources. So what we've done, we're moving those folks. We standardize a lot of the low risk projects, and we've moved more support and focus on those high risk areas. So we have better protection of the environment going forward. We're going to standardize the process of how they're going to do the environmental assessment so they can get to work that much quicker and ensure that the environment is protected. But we're actually building Ontario as we're going forward.
Is that kind of a tough sort of balance or line to navigate between ensuring that the assessment is adequately done and you're also kind of protecting the environment at the same time? Because I think some of the criticism, if there has been criticism on the changes to the EAA, have been that, you know, the government is almost streamlining the process to approve projects too quickly, such that the environmental impact isn't, you know, necessarily adequately considered. That I'm just stating a criticism, but I wonder if there's a challenge then, kind of striking that balance.
Yeah, it was a challenge, and I think we struck the right balance because overall, you know, we were shortening the time frame to do the work plan to actually do the assessment, and we're shortening the time frame on the minister to give a response on the assessment. But the middle work, the actual environmental assessment, the review of the environmental assessment by the Ministry of Environment is still the same time frame. That is not being changed. So the actual work that we really want to focus on is the effects of the environment and how that assessment is going to go forward. That time frame is remaining the same. We just shorten up the start to actually get work, and we put in some timelines because, frankly, as a Minister of Environment, Conservation Parks, I've learned that sometimes things can sit on my desk or not reach my desk for some time, and put the time frame back on me, and I'm sure Premier Ford will make sure I adhere to those timeframes. So that's really going to speed up the process as well.
Okay, that's very interesting. And what has been the feedback so far, I guess, from industry players on the changes to the EAA that were put in part of the COVID Recovery Act?
You know, the stakeholders, the businesses, et cetera, who've reached out are happy with the changes. They see it as a barrier to building infrastructure. From my conversations with them, they too want to protect the environment and minimize environmental effects as they build their infrastructure. And they're happy that we are moving along. So at the end of the day, it's going to save taxpayers dollars as well, because those projects aren't going to take 10 years to build. They're going to take half the time frame, hopefully, and we can have more access to better infrastructure at a cheaper cost, and the environment will be protected and will be there for future generations.
Mm-hmm. I might come back to that later because I noticed a couple of questions coming in on that. I do want to talk a little bit, mostly because I did cover this, about the coming of electric vehicles to Ontario. It's, you know, two huge announcements actually. So Ford, a $1.8 billion investment, and then yesterday FCA Chrysler, basically another investment in Windsor. So, you know, first maybe I'll just get your thoughts on that investment and kind of the direction the government has been taking now in wanting to incentivize EV manufacturing in Ontario. Where is that coming from and why?
Well, you know, Minister Vic Fedeli, Economic Development Minister, and Premier Ford are looking for investments in this province and looking to partner and work with the federal government wherever we can to improve our economy and our health and safety, of course. And the fact that the opportunity arose with, you know, Ford Canada is making the changes, moving towards electric vehicles, and we thought it was an opportune time to ensure that as industry is changing, there is a move towards electric vehicles throughout North America, the world, that we want to retain those jobs in Ontario that are well-paying jobs, creates a strong economy, and how the Ontario government can move towards that. Also, our Made in Ontario Environment Plan moves towards an increased use of electric vehicles in our goal to reduce emissions by 30% by 2030. And the two go hand in hand. And the other point that Minister Fedeli keeps bringing up is to create those batteries. We've seen in Ontario, in our north, in our mining sector, have all the necessary minerals that put together to make those batteries. So that's another way to create even further offshoots of the electric vehicles, is the engines, the battery stations that we built in the parts. So I think hand in hand, it's a good, smart investment that's going to really maintain our status as Ontario as an automaker.
As part of that strategy, I know a couple of years ago there was a change around wanting to subsidize electric vehicles, where the province decided that they were no longer interested in subsidizing EVs. And I think one of the things with EVs is that the cost of purchasing an electric vehicle is still pretty prohibitive because limited demand, etc. So is the discussion around the subsidy, is it ongoing? Is there any kind of thought about reversing or bringing back the subsidy in terms of, because there's an EV strategy right now that the government seems to have?
Yeah, I mean, we're working through helping the automakers bring their product to market, increasing the supply, which hopefully will produce more demand and the prices can come down through competition. What we're doing in our Made in Ontario Environment Plan is we're trying to work with various levels of government and businesses to how to open up the charging stations, create that infrastructure throughout the province. Because for me, living in St. Thomas, Ontario, it's a pretty big barrier to switch over to electric vehicle, considering I think there's one charging station in the entire city, let alone charging at my house. The infrastructure is developing. It's really taken off in the last year. But we're working to increase the infrastructure. You know, the federal government has a rebate program for electric vehicles, which should help folks if they want to move towards that way. But we're looking at the infrastructure and making sure the product can get to the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very interesting. I want to move on a little bit to landfills, and because it's Waste Management Week next week, maybe we can just start with what's the problem here with in terms of, we still have a lot of municipalities using green bins, but yet we still have a lot of waste. So there seems to be a little bit of disconnect in terms of the food waste is still going to landfills. We still have the green bin kind of project going on, and what's the government's thinking around this and that disconnect?
Yeah, that's an ongoing issue. I know the previous government set timeframes for municipalities to switch over to a green bin program, and that's still a few years away for all of them to come on board. And we're taking a look at organic and food waste in the province. Of announcement next week regarding how we can help divert some of that, go into the food waste, into the landfills. Just recently, I mentioned in my speech about the renewable natural gas in Niagara that is using the landfill waste to create renewable natural gas, which is decreasing the emissions from landfills, but also producing a lower carbon or displacing carbon from a natural gas from the ground. So we're winning out that way, and that's just starting. And the Ontario Energy Board passed for Enbridge to start offering renewable natural gas coming January. So people have the option to participate in that program. But I also mentioned waste. I mean, even though we do collect the waste in our blue bins every week, a lot of that is contaminated waste because it's not properly recycled, and it ends up in the landfill anyway. So that's why we're restructuring the Blue Box program across the province to a producer responsibility, where it'll lift the cost burden and the running of the Blue Box system throughout the province to producer responsibility. And we'll have draft regulations coming out before the year end for comment on that. But that's basically going to incentivize the producers to change the way they package their products. We're going to standardize the products that can go into Blue Box to ensure contamination is minimal, so that we can actually improve our diversion rates, which have been pretty stagnant for the last 20-25 years. So, and then again, as I said, the green box, the organic waste, I have more to say on that in the coming months.
And when you say incentivize producers to kind of package differently, it sounds like there's a cost factor attached to that for producers. What are ways in which you can actually incentivize, I guess, producers to sell their products differently in a more environmentally friendly way?
Yeah, so they'll be taking on the cost structure of the Blue Box system. Right now, they pay roughly about 50% of it, so they'll be taking the other 50 from municipalities. So the incentive there is if they want to reduce costs, then they can start changing the way they do the packaging, because it's not a consistent cost. Every year, it's going up and up. It's pretty much almost at an unsustainable level cost-wise, way it's increased. Our studies show that having it switched to producer responsibility could alleviate costs by at least 20% to start, just because there'll be a more standardized system. They have more control. And in my conversations with the producers, they're really keen on getting on board. They do have a green agenda behind them, and they want to make the change. And now they'll have the opportunity and the ability to make those change under, of course, government regulation, but they're going to have a way to move forward. And I just think that's the right step forward, and creating also the circular economy to get those products reused as much as possible.
One of the changes, just still on the landfills topic, one of the changes in the COVID Act was, and correct me if I'm wrong here, was basically making the approval process to actually build landfills a little bit more stringent, in that adjacent municipalities also had to be part of the approval process. I want to understand the thinking around that, and just generally the landfill situation in Ontario. How much space do we have? Like, are we, is that kind of a priority for your ministry in figuring out how we efficiently kind of use our landfill space?
Yeah, we're keeping an eye on our landfill space, and it is shrinking day by day with the amount of landfill we produce every day. The discussion of adding in adjacent municipalities within a certain radius of new landfills applications, and the host municipality as well has to agree, really arose in the Zora Township region as an issue. Landfill was being proposed on the border of another town, Ingersoll, within 800 meters away from the town. That community had no say. The fact that a massive landfill was going to be built on the edge of town, and they felt it was unfair. And we are being more responsible with how we utilize our land in this province, and respect of autonomy of local communities. Our government has made numerous changes to let municipalities have more autonomy. We felt that landfill operators could be more persuaded to work with those municipalities to ensure that everybody's okay with opening up those landfills. It's never a supporting decision. I think at the end of the day, nobody wants to live beside a landfill, but there are necessity at this time and day. And until government, we're working to reduce the amount of waste going to landfill, and hopefully we can reduce our reliance on more landfill space in this province.
So does that mean that the municipalities and the province have a bit more say now in where landfills go, what new landfills are built, or how they're expanded, as opposed to the private sector?
The process is still the same. So what's changed is the host municipality, of course, has to agree, but then a certain radius from the landfill site for host municipalities to have a say. So if they position a landfill that is not close to the borders of another municipality, it's only that one municipality that has to have that say. But we're maintaining our stringent environmental protections on those landfills. We agree they're needed. And I'll give you an example of Walker at Niagara doing a tour of their landfill. The offshoots businesses that they've created of recycling, the asphalt roofs, recycling the asphalt to be used elsewhere, their control of organic waste and capturing that gas. They've now added in this renewable natural gas process. The creation of not peat moss, but soil enhancement they're creating from trees, et cetera. So I mean, they're utilizing, so landfills, if they're transitioned well, can actually be utilized to benefit the environment in a proper way. We just need the direction to ensure that waste is separated and collected properly and put to the right part of the circular economy that needs to be, instead of everything going in one big place and being buried over.
Okay, that's great. We have about 20 minutes left, and I have one more question before I shift completely to audience questions. So for the audience, please feel free to continue kind of submitting your questions. I'm getting them. I want to my final question is around the ban or the proposed Trudeau government ban on single-use plastics starting in early 2021. The federal government is saying that, the strategy will create jobs, obviously reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I just want to know, is this a policy that the Ontario government is on board with?
Yeah, we're taking a look at the impacts of what they proposed to ban in their phase one with regards to plastics, on how it'll affect our recycling industry as we're transitioning our producer responsibility. We feel right now we'd want to continue on that process, is revamping our blue box system so that producers will eventually remove the products that aren't recyclable. Maybe that's a way to work with the federal government, but the products that are recyclable will enhance and ensure that they're not going into our environment, but being reused in our economy. We feel that's the way Ontario is going forward at this point. So we're waiting to have a review. I am in contact with the federal minister. I'm a big proponent of provincial jurisdictions, so of course there'll be continuing conversations to ensure that we're respecting both jurisdictions. And finally, we're part of the Canadian Council of Environment Ministers, including the federal minister, and we've signed on to the zero plastic waste process that we're moving forward. Last year, we talked about getting rid of plastic in our waters and how our governments, provincially and federally, can work together to reduce plastic in our lakes and streams and waterways. And just this past summer, we talked about expanding that into our land. So we are working together in that, and we'll see where the federal government goes after their consultation on their proposed list they put forward.
Okay, I'm going to move on, Minister, to a bunch of questions that have come in. One question has come in around the Environmental Assessment Act, streamlining federal provincial impact assessment processes without compromising environmental protection has long been a goal of many jurisdictions. Could you speak to whether this is still a priority for the Ontario government? And if so, whether the recent changes to the assessment regime move the province closer to a one project, one assessment model? I think you kind of touched on that earlier, but
yeah, no, we touched about it in Bill 197 as well. So currently, there's two processes and two decisions, and we've always felt that both the federal and the provincial government are heading towards the same conclusion: to protect the environment and also ensure infrastructure can be developed. So in our Bill 197, we committed to putting more pressure on the federal government to either defer the process to the province if they're overlapping. If not, we want to work with them to develop a system where there's one process and each level of government gets to make a decision as opposed to separate processes. That might make it a little easier, but overall, we'd rather it just be deferred to the province. It's, we have a long history, over 50 years of doing environmental assessments, and we'll continue to do a good job at that.
Thank you. Another question. The minister referred to a circular economy. What is the vision for a circular economy in Ontario in 2, 5, or 10 years?
Yeah, to start with the review of the blue box system in the province. So we'll be transitioning to producer responsibility, which I think will really help enhance the circular economy between 2023 and 2025. So there's your outlook for the next 5 years with regards to the recycling side of things. But we're going to be working towards how do we, as a government, work with producers to create that standardized list sooner. How do we support the creation of more opportunities to fill in the gaps of the circular economy. 10 years down the road, I'm hoping that Ontario is a leader with recycled material re-entering the stream, and that we could either sell our technology, utilize our technology elsewhere in the world, be a catalyst for change in the world. I spoke with Club Coffee when we announced the new compostable coffee pods. They showed us the new packaging they're going to be piloting in Ontario, which removes the foil packaging for coffee, which is unrecyclable material, and they're moving to a new packaging that it looks pretty cool. So, I mean, that's coming to Ontario, and that's coming to Ontario because we're open to opening up, removing barriers so that they can test their new products onto the marketplace. And for that, the industrial, commercial, institutional side of recycling, we are looking to see how we could move into phase 2 of the producer responsibility and see how we can make that work as well to reduce a majority of the waste going to the landfills.
Okay. This is a question around plastic use. In June 2020, The Economist quoted experts who suggested plastic use had increased 250 to 300% as a result of the reliance on single-use plastics. Is the minister concerned about this growing problem? I think you did answer that, but second part of the question, is the minister looking at energy from waste as a way to address this growing plastic problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some really economic and social benefit from the recovery and reuse of plastics. I think it's a huge opportunity for us, and that waste, as it has increased, is a concern for the province. We're monitoring the PPE issue as that has just gone through the roof, and what we're gonna. How we're going to have to deal with that, and I've been in conversation with the federal minister as well. They're monitoring as well, energy from waste is one of those technologies we want to take a look at how we can support. That'll have to be in conjunction with the Ministry of Energy, as we want to make sure it fits into their plan for energy in this province going forward, but it's definitely something that we'll be reviewing and hopefully, finding more alternatives to create energy from our waste.
I picked up on something you said. You said the PPE issue. So, do you mean the use of just the mass use of plastics now that we have the need for so much of this protective gear?
Well, certainly, all the gloves, the masks, the coverings that our healthcare professionals are using. It's exponential in growth, just like the COVID-19 can be with the use. And where is it going right now? I walk down the streets here in Toronto or in St. Thomas, and I'm seeing masks and gloves on the roadway. Litter is a terrible thing, and it's been worsened by the pandemic. So. We want to figure out what we can do with all this PPE that's just going to our landfills or sitting in trucks somewhere.
That was actually, someone just put in a question on that. What policies have been taken to proactively address the issues concerning this post-COVID era, such as littering, disposing of face masks and gloves irresponsibly along specifically parks and trails? I have seen that too, actually.
It's terrible. So we pass, in part of our Main Ontario Environment Plan, we have a litter day every year, and that's more of an educational awareness type day to kickstart. COVID-19 shut down our first official one in May. We're using Waste Reduction Week next week to kind of promote with folks. I mean, there's a lot of individual responsibility with regards to waste and littering. It's a decision somebody actually makes. It's not caused by government or anything. It's put it in the bin. We need to have them the opportunities to have the opportunity to put the product in the proper bin to be either recycled or sent to the landfill. But more to say about parks with regards to littering upcoming. I could probably announce everything, and you guys would be happy. My staff wouldn't be really happy at all. But we need to. The first thing we're doing is we are making some changes to provide more opportunity for putting your waste in the right bin. Number two, we're trying to do the best we can to review scientific studies on the effects of used PPE to see if it would transmit COVID by different methods of recycling and or going to the land house. How long does it affect groundwater, et cetera? So we are doing that, and we're trying to keep an eye on what do we do with that once we figure it's safe to be recycled.
Okay, there's a very interesting question here around carbon capture. Is there a role for conservation authorities and municipal parks departments to calculate carbon capture to create revenue streams?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting topic of discussion. I've met with a few industries out west who are developing carbon capture for their energy plants. I think it's pretty fascinating stuff. Conservation authorities could play a huge role with the land they own, the expertise they have on how that could be calculated of what it counts. I would love to, and I brought it up with a couple ministers in Quebec and in Manitoba to figure out our carbon capture in Northern Ontario with all the expansive forest we have, how much we are able to, how our own natural heritage and environment is capturing that carbon. I think there's huge opportunity there, and I think that's something that'll be fleshed out more so post-COVID during our jobs and recovery. That's part of another clean tech idea, but we can utilize what we already have in place right now to help move that forward. And that is using conservation authorities or my park system or the regional municipal governments as well.
Actually, Minister, that makes me think of a question. What were there projects pre-pandemic that your ministry really wanted to kind of enact and put into action that got held back quite a bit because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we kept forward moving quite a bit of our project. I mean, other than Litter Day, that was more of an awareness. We were heading into the summer. We kept up with our recycling blue box program. That's probably been put off about 3 or 4 months. It hasn't been. We had hoped to have all the regulations out in August, September this year, but it's going to be November, December. So that really held up that part of the plan. We tried to, when we shut down, we took a look at all the projects we had moving forward, and we wanted to mitigate really high priority ones to minimize their effect. So we, staff worked from home. Thank goodness for internet and connections and technology that we've allowed to be developed over past 30 years, that we're able to continue our lives. But I mean, my ministry staff on the political side and on the bureaucratic side, they didn't stop working on our projects, and they continued to do the outreach. We were able to create these subcommittees on the COVID recovery team. So we've had continual dialogue with the waste sector, the hydrogen sector, and the tech. So there's not a lot that's been pushed back too much. We've kept our agenda going. I think I'm one of the fewer ministries in the government that didn't get totally sidelined by COVID, because we're kind of almost an arm's length from what's going on. We're more of a supportive role for folks out there, and we as I said, we ensured that the parks were safe, and we continued going forward.
I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. This is a rather broad question, and perhaps a good place to kind of wrap up. How has the pandemic raised awareness of and or increased support for environmental protection?
That's a really good question, because you would, at the start, people were focused on their own health and safety, but as they were trapped in their homes during the original shutdown and they were alleviated, where they got to go out for some mental health break was in their own parks, conservation areas. The provincial parks this year, unbelievable amount of attendance. They were at capacity every weekend. I was just in Algonquin Park last week, middle of the week, cold and rainy. It was full of people. I think people really got an idea of how important our nature, our environment is to us, just because it gave them an output to get away from being stuck within your four walls or being worried about COVID. You can get out in nature, you can go for a walk, you can just listen to the animals, or you can listen to the leaves rustle. I think it's really, really opened people's eyes up to what we have to offer in this province and how great it is, and how we need to make sure that we have protections in place so not only we're enjoying it now, but grandkids and great grandkids down the road will have the same experience. So I think in that sense, COVID-19 proved pretty beneficial for folks to really re-experience nature.
Okay, well, I think that's a really good place to end. Thank you so much, Minister. I think the Canadian Club, all of us really appreciate the time that you've taken this whole hour and the prep before that. Anita, I'm just going to pass it back to you right now.
Thank you, Vanmala and Minister Yurek, for a great conversation today. And thanks, Minister, for sharing what Ontario is doing to make sure we're still moving forward on this important file despite the pandemic. I actually learned a lot today, and I would second your most recent comments that myself and my family really rediscovered just how beautiful Ontario is, especially some of our provincial parks. Thank you once again to our sponsors, Waste Connections Canada and Bruce Power, for sponsoring today's event. As a nonprofit, we do count on sponsors to help us further our mission, so thank you once again. We hope you will join us for some of our upcoming events. Next week, on Tuesday, October 20th, we're hosting a panel of experts for a discussion on what Canada's economic rebound will look like and how long will it take. Avery Shenfield from CIBC and Craig Alexander from Deloitte will share their forecasts for Canada's economic recovery. And on October 29th, we'll hear from Canadian journalists and analysts stationed in Washington, D.C. in advance of the election of the century. We do hope that you'll join us for both. Thank you to our AV supplier, Van Valkenburg Communications, and LiveMeeting.ca for making it possible for us to gather virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Please stay healthy and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.